What attracted us to Lightship 95 was another level of a fun experience when you're recording. Recording, for me, is the most fun thing anyone can do. When you add on the fact that you're rolling about on the water in this beautiful boat, it's a great distraction, you know, and straight away there's just loads of interesting things to talk about because you're on a boat. Next minute, you know, you're recording some stuff and they've totally forgotten, you know, all their, you know, issues about, oh, how am I going to record this? Is it going to turn out well? You know, all the different things as an artist, you know, their concerns are coming down and pouring their heart and soul out onto a piece of tape or some ones and zeros, you know.
For London-based Soup Studio, their latest move has seen the team relocating to the unique Lightship 95, a recording studio within a converted ship on the River Thames. We find out about the team's recording style, learn more about how the ship was turned into a studio in the first place, and we meet the crew.
Now we're on the boat. This is the sixth reincarnation, I suppose, for want of a better word, of Soup. Started in a small lock-up in Bethnal Green. About 2000, we're recording an album with a band that I was in, and managed to persuade the record label to give us a few grand's worth of, you know, money to buy a bit of gear and rent a tiny little lock-up, you know, because we're all into recording a little bit. Let's do it ourselves, be a bit of fun. So bought some basic gear, rented a room for 6 months, and made the record. It came to an end, and I suddenly had this massive hole in my heart. Hold on, what, we're not going to have this space to make music anymore? And that it just started from there, really. So the last Soup down at Cable Street, which was amazing. Designing the rooms, you know, building echo chambers and kind of making it, for the first time, working in a place where you kind of have that flow where the live room was totally connected visually to the control room. It felt really, the communication was really good. That's kind of really when Soup, as it is now, started, when we built our own space down there, to our design, and the clients just loved it. It was nice to take good things from professional studios that I'd been recording in other days, and trying to build a studio that didn't have the negative points that I would find in the studios. And it might be something like sight lines, or the fact that there's no place for bands to hang out and have some fun. So managed to build a really good studio that the clients were really into, and then we've kind of brought that lock, stock and barrel onto this boat now.
So the Lightship is basically a floating lighthouse. These were used on sandbanks to mark shipwrecks and small rock areas, anywhere you needed a lighthouse but you couldn't physically build one. It was decommissioned in 2003, and I bought it in 2008. Originally I had no intention of trying to find a lightship. I was looking for a ship specifically to build a recording studio, but I was looking for cargo ships because they're just a big empty space, easy to convert. And I looked at one which happened to be moored at the same place where this was moored, and this was for sale, and I kind of thought that it would be a more interesting prospect, more historic vessel, more unique, etc. To convert the ship to a studio, we first had to remove loads of steel because in its life it'd been converted from a big diesel engine to solar power in the 80s. So they'd put extra bulkheads in where the live room is and created void spaces because they didn't need so much space. And it also meant that they were no longer manned after that point, so a lot of the things that were to do with people being on board were taken away and sealed up, which I then had to reopen, so all the portholes had to be reinstated, access ways had to be cut open again. In the live room there were 2 full height bulkheads, so 4 meters high, 12 mil thick, so all that had to come out, cut up into small sections and then winched out by hand. And similar in the control room, except the control room was basically built on the floor of a massive diesel tank, So that had to all be cut up, which was obviously really dirty because it still had diesel residue all over it. And then that again winched out, and then from there start to build in. So the conversion from the point of view of acoustics was easier than a building in some ways, and harder in others. There was no issues of loading because it's so heavily built. If you build into an existing building, you've got to think about how much weight you're adding to the ceiling, to the walls, etc. That wasn't an issue at all. But the mechanical transmission, if you hit a piece of steel, that sound travels all the way along it. So I had to kind of decouple the internal frame completely from the steel hull. Because there's no template for doing that, no one has done that before. The only thing I could come up with was manufacturing isolation mounts, so the kind of thing that is used to isolate a big piece of machinery from other pieces of machinery or other parts of that same machine. Quite easy to find. Once you start down that route, it's quite easy to find. They bolt or weld to the steel, and then you've got a similar kind of floating situation as you have in a lot of studios, but it's a bit more heavy duty. The acoustic treatment in the live room was kind of done where I could fit it in, and then tested, and then added a bit more, took away, moved things around. The walls are slightly splayed, but obviously it was within a confined space to begin with, so I wanted to retain as much space as possible, and also try and keep as much height as possible. The bass traps go back in various places in the walls over 1 metre, and yeah, it was just put in, tested, others were added. I suppose the biggest job was getting the steel out before we put anything in. There's a small piece of concrete where the monitors sit. I say small, it's kind of about 0.5 metre thick. So that whole panel behind the console where the monitors sit in the control room is concrete. The hardest part in constructing the internal rooms in the studios was actually finding a level, finding points to work from, because the whole ship is a perfectly crafted banana, so there's no right angles, you can't use a spirit level. So once the floors were down, the walls will work from there, but in other spaces we had to work from the ceiling.
We built the echo chamber on the boat because we built one in the last place. It was a bit of a risk. It was a bit of a fanciful thing to do. You know, lots of old studios had them in the past, and I liked the sound of them when I heard them on record. I didn't really know if it was going to work or not. Just kind of fluked it really. Tiled out the space above the kitchen where we stuck a few mics up, and it just gives that extra dimension of space really that you can't get from any other type of digital or analog reverb. It's about air moving around, it's about distance, it's about sound slapping off tiles, you know, and just to add a little bit of that sizzle into recordings is, yeah, it's amazing. So we moved onto the boat and had to build one here somehow because we just all got so used to having that as part of the sound. Sometimes you'd just use that sound if it was some distant kind of clap or something that you wanted, percussion-y thing. You'd just use those mics. But I'm glad I took the time to do it again. It's a ball ache to build, but I mean, now I can't really hear a recorded drum kit without an echo chamber and think of it as a well-recorded drum kit. It's just what I'm used to hearing. It's what you'd hear if a drum kit was in a room. You know, as well, it's just got that extra little depth from any kind of woody kind of room mic. It's just got this extra little sizzle, which especially helps on drums, you know, but for anything. I've always loved people's demos and the amazing connection you get when there's no technology in the way of just someone playing or singing, no one looking, listening, and it's trying to get that vibe, you know, that process or lack of process into recording. trying to get the best out of people. I guess that's my production, ideas. I'm not really a technical producer. Like I say, I've not come from a technical background. I've had to learn over the years how to use all this equipment.
Well, I didn't realise when I first came on the ship, but I've been looking at the ship for many years. The Lightship 95 was the lightship that was on the Goodwin Sands, the most treacherous part of English waters, the sandbanks in the English Channel, that claimed thousands and thousands of ships over the years. And this ship was on the sandbank, warning sailors off from the 50s up until 2003. And I grew up on the Kent coast, and I could see it twinkling on the horizon while I was first doing my own, sitting in my parents' loft, learning how Cubase works years ago. And it was just there every day. The move to the ship was the second move that Simon and I had done together as running Soup Studios. When the ship came up, our tenancy at our old place was always very precarious. We'd only ever been given a year's lease, and we were kind of worried that this would be the last year before they kicked us out. So we jumped ship, as it were, before we were pushed, because Ben had this wonderful studio here and it was too good an opportunity to miss. The guys who run Trinity Buoy Wharf have designated the area to be used for cultural purposes. They've written it into their lease, which is 120 years, which was a big reassuring thing for me, having been kicked out of various studios over the years with rising rents. And there's lots of interesting things that go on here. There's interesting art installations, there's the Royal Drawing School, there's the ballet and the opera have their bases here. When Simon and I first started working together, we both come from a background of indie bands, and that's the first band that came to us. But we've been really fortunate that, as you grow up, your music tastes develop. I think London's one of the best places in the world for jazz right now. If you've got people like Moses Boyd, Theon Cross, Nubia Garcia, Joe Armon-Jones, and we've been lucky enough to record all of them and many more really exciting jazz bands, as well as getting quite a range of other acts as well.
My background is probably in a lot more kind of guitar-based, sort of rock, heavier stuff like that. And so it's been great since I've been in the UK to be able to work on a lot more jazz and folk and different music, classical. But the mainstay here is very eclectic. Every day is different.
Soup Studio has a hybrid setup, employing both digital and analog recording formats. One of these hybridizations is their simple and cost-effective use of tape in a digital workflow.
So with the Atari, we are monitoring most of the time straight from the repro head. So we're hearing, essentially the playback moments after it's gone on via the record head. We hear it on the repro head, and we take that straight into tools in real time. So before each session, we do a quick little measurement where I, ping a little sound on a path through tape, but also on a path straight to digital, and measure that time, which is normally sort of 4,500 samples or thereabouts. And then from there, any channels that we want to direct through tape, we can do and record to digital straight afterwards, alongside other channels that might be going straight to digital, and sort of maintain sync that way. And it's great because we can sort of, get 15 minutes on that bit of tape, rewind it, it's all been ingested to digital in real time, and then use that bit of tape over and over and over and over. So it's pretty rare that we'll actually keep something on tape the entire time. And it means, in a workflow sense, we get all the benefits of being able to hear what's coming straight off the tape without having to kind of, buy fresh reels and cost a lot of money to do it. So when we moved onto the Lightship, we decided it was time to upgrade our mixing board, and so we got the Calrec S2. The studio does a lot of live recording, a lot of live band recording, so we need loads of inputs and loads of space to work on the desk, whether that's by having loads of auxiliaries or just loads of channels available at any one time to handle those sorts of sessions. And the Calrec is just faultless in that sense. In terms of the functionality of the space, it's great, what Ben's designed here is a place that, a control room that's, luxuriously sized. You can fit a lot of people in here, but it never feels too crowded. The space, you can see enough of what you need to see through into the recording spaces. There's plenty of ways that you can configure the room to sort of optimize sight lines, and as well as the sonics. It's just been very flexible. We haven't had a session in here that hasn't sort of done really well in that space.
Well, when we started, it was myself, Simon and Giles getting together, and we brought all of our equipment together. Some of it was outboard equipment and bits and pieces, but I brought quite a lot of old guitars, amplifiers, anything, Wurlitzer, and these things kind of grow and grow as you find the right tools. This guy here is, well, I can't actually answer for its gender, but this is one of my favourites. This is an old Gibson from about 1953 or 54, and these kind of guitars, they might actually be better made nowadays, but there's something that, not all the time, but the really good old instruments have a certain magic to them, a bit of depth of sound and an inspirational quality that in the kind of MP3 era might be laughed at a bit, but they are just absolute magical, soulful things. You just put that in front of a microphone and let someone do their thing. It's quite rare actually with studios to have, such wonderful instruments right there, and that's something we pride ourselves on and try not to take for granted. All of us guys originally started from bands or some kind of musical background. That really helps other musicians making music here, because we know what it's like to be in a band, or musicians are often dealing with labels or tricky situations or schedules, and we all have to deal with that, or have had to deal with that. So it's kind of like we're on your side from the minute you step in the door. Performing in the studio is very different to the live experience, so it can be quite an intimate situation, and we hope we're respectful and encouraging in those important moments.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and share it, and check out more Sound on Sound video content on our YouTube channel.